reprezentanți. Dați-mi voie să dau citire listii participanților ședinței cu privire la rezultatele evaluării internaționale pe review a Curții de Conturi. Deci, la prezenta ședință sunt prezentă eu, Tatiana Cunețchi, președintele Comisiei de Control al Finanțelor Publice, Vasile Porțevski, secretarul Comisiei de Control al Finanțelor Publice. Am avut în așteptare președinții comisiilor parlamentare, dar probabil că au alte activități, deci dacă vor veni, se vor prezenta. Și din partea oficialilor europeni, Alistair Swerbrick, consilier superior de politici Sigma, conducătorul echipei de evaluare pe review, Inguna Sudraba, expert Sigma, fost membru al Parlamentului Republicii Letonia și ex-auditor general a Republicii Letonia, membru a echipei de peer review, Adam Grodzki, șef adjunct secției delegației Uniunii Europene în Moldova, Luca Oreani Viera, reprezentantul Directoratul General pentru Vecinătate și Extindere a Comisiei Europene, Iosip Jurici, manager de program Delegația Uniunii Europene, Peter Late, expert de proiect, Delegația Uniunii Europene în cadrul Curții de Conturi, Anita Nilsson, expert de proiect, Oficiul Național de Audit al Suediei. Și Curtea de Conturi a Republicii Moldova este prezent domnul președinte Marian Lupu și echipa membrii Curții de Conturi, toată lumea cunoaște șeful aparatului și Violeta Balan. Deci, în așa componență, plus la prezenta ședință sunt prezenți consultanții din Comisia de Control al Finanțelor Publice și cei care sunt interesați sunt bineveniți. În acest context, deci agenda noastră presupune următoarea procedură. Cuvântul de salut care o să mă expun eu, prezentarea rezultatelor evaluării internaționale a Curții de Conturi, domnul Alistair Swerbrick și Inguna Sudraba vor modera de sine stătător cine urmează să ia cuvântul în cadrul acestei prezentări, discuții privind concluziile și recomandările evaluării, viziunea Curții asupra acestor evaluări, domnul președinte Lupu și deci concluzii la sfârșit, dacă mi-ți permite, le voi face eu. Cu această ocazie, deci începem activitatea, permiteți-mi să mă expun cu cuvântul de salut. Doamnelor și domnilor, stimați oaspeți, onorată asistență, vă salut în cadrul Parlamentului Republicii Moldova, în calitatea mea de președinte a Comisiei de Control al Finanțelor Publice. Trebuie să vă spun că însăși crearea comisiei în anul 2019 s-a făcut cu scopul de a spori gradul de transparență și responsabilitate a autorităților în utilizarea banului public și a patrimoniului public. Conform domeniului său de competențe, Comisia de Control al Finanțelor Publice asigură cadrul legal privind auditul public extern, organizarea și funcționarea instituției supreme de audit, Curtea de Conturi a Republicii Moldova, examinează și auditează rapoartele anuale și de audit ale Curții de Conturi și ale entităților auditate, auditează raportul anual asupra administrării și întrebuințării resurselor financiare publice și patrimoniului public, examinează rapoartele anuale ale Guvernului privind executarea bugetului de stat, bugetul asigurărilor sociale de stat și a fondurilor asigurărilor obligatorii de asistență medicală, etc., etc. Curtea de Conturi, ca instituție supremă de audit a Republicii Moldova, are misiunea să exercite controlul asupra modului de formare, administrare și întrebuințare a resurselor financiare publice și a patrimoniului public prin realizarea auditului public extern. Astăzi, Comisia de Control al Finanțelor Publice și Curtea de Conturi, la modul practic, au devenit o verigă veritabilă a sistemului integrat, care asigură consolidarea funcției de supraveghere și control parlamentar. Deși a trecut puțin timp de la înființarea acestui tandem, ca expresie a controlului parlamentar, deja devin vizibile efectele asupra legalității, conformității, economicității, eficienței și eficacității gestionării resurselor financiare publice și a patrimoniului public. Bineînțeles că ne dorim ca Curtea de Conturi a Republicii Moldova să-și dezvolte potențial toate abilitățile, să fie mai aproape de entitățile auditate prin experiența și expertiza sa, pentru a perfecționa modul de administrare a veniturilor și cheltuielilor publice, ceea ce într-un final îmbunătățește viața cetățeanului de rând. În drumul curții spre performanță și dezvoltare strategică, considerăm absolut necesară și utilă parcurgerea exercițiului evaluării peer review, mai ales în așa domenii precum independența și cadrul legal, guvernanță, audit financiar, stabilirea relațiilor cu părțile externe interesate. Deosebit de pozitiv apreciem colaborarea Curții de Conturi cu cei mai buni și mai experimentați auditori de nivel internațional. Și de aceea considerăm că evaluarea peer review oferă cele mai bune prilejuri pentru a verifica încotro ne îndreptăm și a profita de experiența internațională avansată spre beneficiul tuturor. Ne dorim o Curte de Conturi care să se bucure de încredere cetățenilor și care să ofere un sprijin real și consistent în administrarea eficientă a banului public, contribuind astfel la creșterea calității vieții în Republica noastră. În continuare, deci, doresc să ofer cuvântul domnului Alastair Swarbrick, consilier superior de politici Sigma, conducătorul echipei de peer review pentru prezentarea rezultatelor evaluării internaționale a Curții de Conturi.
Thank you, Madam Konechka, for those warm words of introduction. Dear members of the Public Financial Control Committee, Mr. Lupu, members of the Court of Accounts, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to be here, myself, Alistair Swarbrick from Sigma, and my colleague and friend, Madam Nguna Sidraba from Latvia, to present the results of the peer review. Before we actually present the results of the peer review, we have a message from the President of the Supreme Audit Institution of the Czech Republic, and who is also the chairman of EuroSci, the group of European Supreme Audit Institutions, congratulating the Court of Accounts on its peer review. So if you beg my moment, I will just play this video from Mr. Kala, and hopefully it works on the interpretation as well.
Dear colleagues, it's said that it's not difficult to come up with new ideas. It's difficult to get rid of the old ones that can sometimes hold us back. Passing the peer review shows us that the Court of Accounts of the Republic of Moldova is doing everything to be the most trustworthy, professional and relevant institution for its country. And it also shows a certain courage. Looking in the mirror is not always easy, but very often that's what we need. The Supreme Audit Office of the Czech Republic also went through a peer review, and it helped us a lot. We discovered that it's possible to move specific things forward. In our case, for example, it was mostly about analytical activity or strategic planning. Identifying the topic was the first key steps for changing in the right direction. The results of your peer review make me especially happy as the president of EuroSci, and I am very glad that there are such audit institutions in our ranks that strive to be better and better. Institutions that have the courage to work on it. There are never enough of those. My congratulations.
Modern technology always beats me. First, I wanted just to reiterate a comment that Mr. Kala made around courage. I think the Court of Accounts should be commended for actually initiating this peer review. It wasn't us forcing them to do a peer review, it was them asking for a peer review to assess where they are. And I think it takes a little bit of bravery and courage to take that step, to have external independent assessors to look at how you're doing, to look at certain practices, knowing that you have areas to improve. I think the Audit Court of Accounts should be commended for taking this step, and I think it shows a level of maturity as an organization that you want to do that as well. In this presentation, I'm going to quickly talk about the focus of the peer review, the scope of it, quickly talk about the assessment criteria and the methods used, and then the overall conclusion, and then some of the key findings and recommendations. Inguna and I will split up the presentation as we go through. But just to quickly remind everybody that this peer review was led by Sigma, by myself as the project manager, supported by Inguna. And just to underline the experience that we have in this area, I think it's important to recognize that Inguna was the former Auditor General of Latvia and former Member of Parliament, so she has significant experience in audit. And from my background, I have 25 years of public sector audit, including 5 years as the Auditor General of the Cayman Islands. So we have hopefully a deep understanding of effective external audit in the public sector and supreme audit institutions. And I would say that Sigma has a significant experience in conducting peer reviews across the candidate countries and neighborhood countries. For example, we've done 3 peer reviews in Bosnia and Herzegovina, done ones in Serbia, Montenegro, and various other countries. So we have a significant experience. And we are able to kindly lend on the resources of the Latvian State Audit Office and the Turkish Court of Accounts to provide experts in particularly around financial audit and also in communication and external stakeholder engagement to support the team in taking forward the peer review and conducting the work and reporting. Now, moving on to the scope. Sorry, I need to put my glasses on. I'm getting blind as I get older. Let's look at what we actually did cover in the peer review. We looked at the independence and legal framework that the court operates under, including the constitutional aspects and the specific, not just the audit law, but other laws that affect the work of the court. We considered the governance and management of the Court of Accounts, where we looked at the organizational structure, the management arrangements in place for decision making, where we also considered like ethical behavior and the use of ethics, and transparency and accountability of the court. We also considered the relationships with external stakeholders, looking at how the court communicates and engages with external stakeholders, how it communicates its role and responsibility externally, how it communicates its work and results, all of the focus on how it increases the impact of its work ultimately, and how it can promote accountability and transparency in the use of public resources and money. And the final area we looked at was how they conducted financial audit. We looked at their approach and methodology, but then how they actually also implemented that audit in practice. And then we considered also the quality arrangements to ensure that the audits have been conducted into a good quality standards and that the audit opinions they gave are safe and robust. And we particularly focused on the mandatory financial audits they're required to do at this stage. But as well as looking at what we did cover, it's important to understand what we didn't cover. We didn't look at the strategic and annual planning process and the monitoring and reporting of their own performance. We didn't consider the human resource management at this stage, or wider resource management. And we didn't look at performance and compliance audit. There were good reasons for not looking at these areas. We understood that through our discussions with the court that these were significant areas where development activities were being undertaken, and that it was recognized that they needed to do some further work. And it's something that we can consider looking at in the future potentially. So in conducting a peer review, it's important to understand, again, what sort of benchmark and criteria we conduct these reviews against. What objective criteria we use to conduct these assessment. And I think when we consider the status that Moldova now has as a candidate country, the importance of this increases in terms of not just Chapter 32 requirements of the European acquis communautaire, but also on other aspects of the relationship with the European Union and European Commission. So the expectations under the developing relationships with the EU is that we are looking to develop institutions that finance supreme order institutions that are in line with international standards and are in line with good European practice. So clearly, the benchmarks that we used, and we would use in any peer review for a supreme order institution, are the framework of professional pronouncements from the InterSci community, which includes the international supreme InterSci audit standards. We also use the peer review guidelines that have been developed by InterSci. And we also consider good practices that we see among SIs across Europe, because there are certain aspects of the arrangements within SIs that are not covered by the specific standards developed by InterSci. Now, before we get into the detailed findings, I just want to make some overall conclusions about the outcomes of the peer review. I think it's important to say from our perspective that we see the Court of Accounts is on the right path and is developing its practices to meet the expectations of the InterSci framework for professional practices. And it's on the path to building that credible and independent institution. But there are challenges that need to be addressed, and there are opportunities for development. We see that there are some impediments in the legal framework, for example, which I'll come on to in a minute. And there's still work for the institution to embed practices within its, and institutionalize the practices within itself. And, you know, there's still some risks and fragility in the system which could push things back. But ultimately, they're on the right path, but there's still work to do. And I think that's ultimately the overarching message that we have, and that we need to encourage and protect the court in its development going forward. Now, moving on to the first area around the independence and legal framework. We're looking at this, does the actual legal framework support the independence of the Court of Accounts? And is it respected in practice? I don't want to talk about the Constitution too much, but the Court of Accounts is in the Constitution, which is a good thing. But if we are being honest, there are certain elements of that we'd like to see, we would expect to be strengthened at some point. But obviously, constitutions are very hard to change. So I just mentioned that. But in terms of the actual audit law of the Court of Accounts, the audit law, from our perspective, is generally adequately provides for independence and autonomy in many key aspects. It's in reasonable shape. But there are some impediments in the legal framework. And through the implementation of the legal framework by the executive, which to an extent affect the autonomy and discretion of the Court of Accounts in certain key aspects, particularly around organizational structure and human resource management, and also to an extent financial independence. Some more in terms of things like the audit mandate of the institution. The Court of Accounts has a broad audit mandate, and which we think is fantastic, is great. But there are some individual entity laws which do impact on the work that the court has to do, and from our perspective, should be addressed going forward. With respect to the Court of Account members, they presently have a 5-year renewable mandate, which in the way of thinking these days is becoming considered quite a short-term mandate and is dependent on re-election, which creates some challenges around independence and conflicts, and we'll talk about that a bit more. And The Parliament has the right to demand audit tasks, which to an extent, and I'll expand on in a second, could be seen as having an impact on the discretion of the court to determine its own work agenda. If we look at the recommendations, I think the first one is that we see that there's some work to do to try and strengthen the Court of Accounts' financial and organisational independence. For example, considering how the public laws on public service, public servants impact on the financial and operational independence of the court. There's some question marks about the financial independence and how that is respected in practice, and the role of the executive and having a direct involvement in operational priorities and revising the court's budget. This clearly, from our perspective, is something that needs to be addressed while ensuring that the court is still accountable for how it uses public resources and takes account of the financial climate they face. In terms of something else, the next step recommendation is around the court should be solely responsible for setting its operational priorities and work programs. So if we're thinking about the area where the Parliament can demand certain audits, our view would be that the Parliament should be able to ask for certain audits, but it should be up to the court to actually decide whether they do them. But I would say that most sensible Supreme Audit institutions do take into account what their Parliament says and tries to meet their needs as much as possible. But ultimately, I think it should be just solely down to the court to do that forward. Something that we in Sigma we advocate, and there's no hard and fast rule about this, but we think it's from an independence perspective and to manage conflicts of interest, that for heads of Supreme Audit institutions and members, potentially longer non-renewable mandates are more effective in ensuring that independence and managing any potential conflicts. And we're talking here of mandates between 8 to 10 years. And we've seen generally across the PSI community, the momentum is to having non-renewable longer mandates come in. And the final aspect around the law is we think that in terms of the COO staff, that their status and their position should be in line with other relevant institutions and be in line with the professional expectations you'd have for a Supreme Audit institution in terms of things like the remuneration and such like. So and these are important things in recognizing the status and the professional requirements for such an institution. And at that point, I will hand over to Inguna to talk about the next session.
I'm glad to continue, and I will continue with message what Alastair said in his speech, that when we are looking and assessing Supreme Audit institutions, I'm always saying that it's mirror of public finance management system itself, and it tells a lot how in country institutional setup is organized, how is understanding of sound financial management is working, because it's not only in hands of Supreme Audit institution to do this job, it's common job of public system to set up such public finance management where every taxpayer could trust how money is used. And when we look on issues like governance and management, it's of course, first of all, story about being strong leadership in institution. And we are glad to say that Moldova benefit from that you have institution with strong leadership, but there are teamwork working in institution, which is very important to get reforms going on. Once you are able to set up goals what you want to reach, you should have people able to follow these reforms and implement these reforms. And answering on question how this governance and management is organized, we are looking how effective is management in institution, and of course for things which could be improved. An institution like in Moldova, Court of Accounts, you got management where are basic and main practices in place. So you have strong daily management, you have strong weekly, monthly management, you have team which are talking to each other, who are able to, set up plans and ask for accountability or implementation of these plans. But areas what we see could be improved and worked further. It's when we looked how decisions are taken on court level, it means that now you have practice that court approves every audit report. And looking on efficiency of management, it could be area to look after. Maybe it's worth deliver this decision-taking level on department level. Not every decision on each report should be taken on level of court. Where a court place as court in decision-making is to take more strategic role, to take maybe decisions on more important, like consolidated accounts, audits on court level, and leave this more management level on department level. And again, there is issue on transparency. Of course, it's very good to have every decision maybe taken on in the environment that people could follow how court is working, how court itself is taking decisions, but always you should keep this line of professionalism. Not maybe any professional discussions and professional scrutining should be public. It doesn't mean that you want to hide something from public, but there are level of professionalism which should stay in-house before it gets announced for public. As I said, we see that there are good team working in institution, but still there are some silos which should be broken in cooperation between departments. But again, sharing good practices, how one department does audit compared to another department, it's just not only story about being competitive between departments, but also sharing good practices, being open to discuss problems what we have, because any discussion leads to better work and improvement in work what we are doing. And we looked also on set up internal institution, how functions are divided, how these reporting accounting lines are working, and we gave some also recommendations, maybe to look internally on these accountability lines and make them more straightforward. But again, saving on decision-taking time, saving on resources, and for people it's easy to understand their role and place in institution if you have just one direct reporting line. And it's also about improving internal communication, setting up more understandable principles, lines, how internal communication is working in institution. And what is important for Supreme Audit Institution, that they are accountable to public. It means it's also in hands of Parliament that financial statements of Court of Accounts are audited annually, and these results are published, of course, every year. On next area, which is relations with external stakeholders, and it's again very important area, because accounting chamber reports not only to Parliament, which is main stakeholder, it reports also to public, and it's so important that all these messages, starting from role, what institution plays in public finance management system, ending to each individual audit report, is understood by all stakeholders. Again, for Supreme Audit Institution, there is all necessary basic instruments in place. There is communication strategy, there is an annual activity plan, how to communicate, but as always, you have areas where you could improve your performance. And when we looked how communication practices are organized so far in Court of Accounts, we see that if you will use more direct instruments, as you will segment more messages to whom you are talking about what, it will be more directly understood by your stakeholders, because you have different groups of NGOs, you have different groups of institutions whom you are auditing, but always when you are coming with message, you want to come with some message, you should understand to whom you will talk, how to make this message more direct. It means that in public, people will better understand what you are doing, why you are doing, and what is your role, because more people will understand a role of Court of Accounts. It means that also they will be supportive following implementation of recommendations, because main job of Court of Accounts is to get change in way how public money is administrated, how public money is used, and main supporters, of course, for Court of Accounts, this will be your society who are interested to get better service, better value for money. And also important area of cooperation is between accounting chamber and institutions who are in strengths of procedures jurisdictionally, who are following implementation of laws and regulations like prosecutor's office and all other bodies, investigation agencies. We looked in area how this cooperation is working between Supreme Audit Institution and these bodies. Again, there are good relationships, there are regular communication going on. We see that you should institutionalize more this relationship. It means that more straightforward communication, a relationship will get to better results, but more quickly your findings will be will go through all these investigations, and that people will see that if somebody misused the money, they took wrong decisions, that of course they are taken to court, but it's not the main result, of course, of accounting chamber. I think this is what I wanted to say on these areas, and good luck in implementation of recommendations.
Thank you, and Gudrun. I'm going to come on to the final area, which is around financial audit, where we considered the approach and methodology of the court in conducting financial audits and whether it complied or is in line with international standards. We also considered whether it has been implemented effectively by the court, whether the arrangements to ensure its quality are in place, and we also looked at the effectiveness of the reporting and the delivery of the reports of the court on the financial audits. And I think we can safely say that there's an awful lot of work has been undertaken to develop and implement financial audit practices, and clearly they have developed sound audit manuals and methodologies which are in line, broadly in line with the international framework for professional practice, framework for professional practices. There are a few specific issues that need to be addressed, and these are detailed in the report, but broadly we're fine with that. In terms of, I think the key recommendation, one of the key recommendations is that the court need to continue to work to embed the excuse me, I'll start again. You wouldn't think it's my native language sometimes. You need to consider how to embed, the court needs to continue to work to embed sound financial audit practices across the court and ensure it is clearly institutionalized within the institution. With respect to the system of quality and control and quality assurance, the system that has been developed is compatible with the requirements and international standards of supreme audit institutions, but again, more work has to be done to institutionalize this system within the institution. And finally, with reporting practices, what we see for the financial audit is reasonably well developed, but the challenge is to increase the value and impact of the work. And I would say that the court are not alone in that challenge amongst supreme audit institutions around the world. But looking at the specific recommendations we made, things like ensuring that there's a systematic approach for regularly updating the audit manuals, in the Court of Accounts strategic and annual planning framework is fundamental. The international audit standards continue to change. For example, the quality standards have changed recently in the international auditing community, and that will feed through into the INTERSAI standards in due course. So I think we always need to be cognizant that we need to develop manual, and the actual technical methods for doing audit continue to evolve and develop, particularly as we see the digital age coming through, and that is having an impact on how supreme audit institutions and auditors across the world conduct their work. It's important that audit practices are standardized and embedded across the institution, and this is not about everybody taking the same decision or not being able to apply their judgment, but it's just about the framework which you work in. You have standardized working paper documents and such like are implemented. It's also important that to continue and embed financial audit practice, that they ensure that the staff have the competencies, the skills, the knowledge, and expertise to deliver financial audit, so that is a continual process to ensure that that is maintained and developed. And then in terms of increasing the impact of the reporting, something that's more of a medium-term perspective in terms of recommendations is trying to bring forward the audit cycle to report the findings of the audits closer to the relevant financial year end. And there's a number of lessons to be learned from other sides and how they've done that previously. And then developing strategies to try and improve the implementation of recommendations, and that is something that the court should be doing in conjunction with their colleagues on the Public Financial Control Committee. So, and something that's not here is about the development of the state budget audit and looking at that from a group perspective and continuing to try and evolve that and be proactive in encouraging the Ministry of Finance to try and evolve how it reports on the overall public expenditures of the country. So that's the main findings or the key findings from the report, from the peer review. In concluding, I'd like to make a few thank yous. I'd also like to thank Mr. Lupu, the President of the Court of Accounts, for his contributions, for his encouragement for this process and supporting it in all aspects, along with the members of the court from that perspective. I'd like to particularly thank Mr. Katarina Paknahat, the head of staff, and Violetta Balan, the head of international relations, for coordinating and working with us and driving the process forward. Without their dedication and work, it wouldn't have been as smooth. Although we had our challenges, it wouldn't have been as smooth a process. So thank you very much for that. And from our perspective, that's all we have to say on the report specifically. But I would like to ask our colleague, Mr. Luca Oriana from the DG NEAR, to make any observations that he may have from his perspective on the work of the peer review and the ongoing development of the Court of Accounts. Luca?
Thank you, colleagues. I think this is quite an important milestone, something that we work for long to get through. Of course, COVID made such that things were delayed. So now it's a matter to catch up. I'm not going to repeat what the colleague have said. We were supportive, we were expecting good results, and we had good results. As also we are aware that the road is still long. Now, in the Commission opinion that we prepared in June and that was approved by the Council, we have said that the state of PFM system in this country is relatively good, but more needs to be done, and you know it. Now, each institution has its own homework to do. You know that the issue of public finance investment, the issue of the public investment management is particularly weak in this country. There are issues that should be also strengthened in this country, and this is the issue of internal control and the issue of external control, external audit, and procurement. Now, we are working now on the government as a long exercise, also in collaboration with the World Bank, and of course the delegation was on the driving seat on this PFM strategy. We would appreciate your active involvement as Parliament and as Court of Accounts in the a strategy which is a strategy of the country, not just a strategy of the Ministry of Finance. So please be active in this couple of months, because this is where we are. As we know, we are quite late for seeing that very well, but hopefully we will have, by the end of the year, the government has committed by the end of the year, we will have the PFM strategy approved. So, and this also, it's, for your information, it's a key condition for the disbursement of the next budget support, multi-annual financial framework, that will not be disbursed if this condition is not met by in December. And this was very clear. And then the next step will be on procurement, and this will be another issue. Now, on the chairman of the Parliament a few minutes ago in this meeting said that the path to our European accession is irreversible. And indeed, we believe this. And many years I've been working in Moldova, and I do believe this. And we work on this very hard, even though times were at times difficult. Now, and of course, the European Commission will not allow this process to be reversed. I want to be very clear about this, okay? So we'll do whatever it takes not to have this process reversed. But of course, how long it will take depends on you, okay? And one of the aspects of the succession process, is the issue related to the quality of public finance management and its institution. Now, this relates to what Alistair said, to various chapter assessments. There are chapters 32, 5, etc., etc. But there is also a political criteria. This is what I would like to convey to you. The PFM issue is not a technical issue, it's a political criteria of accession to the EU, okay? Okay, it is difficult, it is technical, it's sometimes a jargon, but it is a political criteria. And which will allows you to, the government, the Moldova, to access then to the management of EU funds, okay? Amongst others. So there are issues that executive has to do. The Minister of Finance has a big homework to do in terms of public investment management, in terms of internal control. But we believe also that the Supreme Institution and the Parliament, they have some road to do. I refer in particular and to what the colleagues has mentioned, and I fully agree on this. And this is why we pushed along for this peer review. I remember it was a discussion that we had with the chairman many years ago, a chairman that has, of course, our full trust and confidence, and I want to reiterate this. There is the issue of resources. Now, it's nice to make plans, etc., but the issue of resources will have to be tackled. Now, it is not for tomorrow morning, but we cannot put it on the table. So the issue of the quality of staff, the recruitment staff, the management of staff, we think that Moldova is not yet there. We think that the Parliament of Moldova and the government of Moldova have to do more to empower the Court of Accounts to be a role of watchdog, because this is how trust of citizens also can be increased, okay? Now, I'm not going to enter into detail, but there are issues such, for example, you know very well that one of the things that is important for citizens is the issue of performance audit. So not just financial audit, but which are the results? Now, in performance audit, Moldova is very behind, okay? And if we have not handled this in the evaluation, it does mean that we are not aware that this is a problem, okay? So there is a process that will take years, but we need to tackle it up front, okay? There is the issue of the financial independence then, because we believe that this is not a detail. We believe that this is an issue that has to be tackled once and for all, okay? And the European Union is there to support you. Now, it will support in exchange of something. We will not support because a blank check, forget it. But if you say, in exchange of this accrued financial independence, we will be able to do this and this and this that we are not able to do, then this will become an argument that people like me and people like my colleagues can bring to the political leadership to say we give for this, okay? And not just because Moldova is a nice country. because the competition for money, as you know, it's very much strong, and we had just a few weeks ago, we had a budget support for Ukraine of 100 million, but we cannot go on like this. It's just not possible, okay? So the idea that the money will flow without limitation, this, I mean, don't count on this, okay? And then there is issue, for instance, the issue of quality of control and assurances. This is SI 145, you know very well. It's an issue that also concerns your court. However, we think that we are quite satisfied for the progress of the court has done. I think that the court is established itself as a credible and reputed supreme audit institution in the European system. Okay? An issue that is for us more of a concern, and I want to be very frank with you, is the issue of the Parliament, the capacity of the Parliament to handle certain tasks. Okay? This, obviously, it was good in the past for the system that was in the past, but in the system that you want to do in order to access to the EU, also the Parliament will have to do its homework. Okay? Now, we have pushed quite a lot for the creation of this very important, let me say the right names, Public Finance Account Committee. And I don't want to brag, but if it was not for our intervention a few years ago, I doubt that this would have been the case. So, but I'm glad that now experts, independent experts, say this has created an added value. Now, we will not accept that this committee is depossentiated unless we have valid reason for this to be known. But we need this to be clear, because as of now, we have hearsay that this happened, this might not happen. We have a policy dialogue. We have an ambassador here. He has a task for the political representation of the European Union. If there are issues that are of your concern, you please address yourself via the colleagues to the ambassador representing the European Union, and then in Brussels we'll be able to act appropriately. If, and of course, we will ask clarification of the various party, but then. So this is to say that we will not accept that under the issue of the need of the day, what we have worked for many, many years will be jeopardized, because I don't think that Moldova can afford this type of gains, okay? Now, on the issue of the Parliament, I think that we repeat what we have said many times. We are willing to help the Parliament to the extent possible. We have done twinnings, we have done technical assistance, we have done budget support. We can do more twinnings, we can do more assistance, but you need to be proactive. Okay? Now, there is now a very important twinning that will start soon, focus most on the judicial system, but we foresee, and we just have discussion with the World Bank yesterday, to step up, together with the World Bank, and of course other colleagues, Sigma, etc., our support to the Parliament in their, I would say, supervision of the public budget at national and subnational level. Now, this is a big field of work. It will take many years, but I think that we need to act more to provide the Parliament with the resources to execute a better governance of public finances. One of the issues also that we need to discuss with you is the role of Parliament, for instance, in the issue of the Fiscal Council. Okay? And I think that the committee, the Budget Committee, the Economic Committee, they must have a role in how the fiscal rules and the Fiscal Council are done in this country. But you cannot have a rule if you don't have the staff, you don't have the competencies, okay? Because you need in-house economists. So this is a long way. We are willing to help you. I think that given the circumstances, you have done an excellent job in this year, in this very difficult year. And please be reassured that if you want to advance more, you will always have the European Union on your side. Okay? We are a friend, we are colleagues, we know how things are, so we need to be also diplomatic, fine. But please be aware that it is our interest that you advance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca, for your perspective from the European Commission. I'd like to ask Peter Latte if he'd like to make any comments, as he has a good working, close relationship with the court and the Public Financial Control Committee. Peter?
Thank you, Esther. I will not miss the use the opportunity to open my mouth today. Such a great day. It's a harvest day. I arrived some 5 years ago into Moldova with the EU project. My guiding member is sitting now as a head of the committee. The law was not adopted yet, but we knew what's coming. And the EU has introduced, started to support with introduction of financial audit, and here we are now. After 5 years, we have peer review, which gives us good assurance that indeed we are in a good path. As Mr. Kallas said, and as Mr. Swarbrick said, it's courage of the Court of Accounts putting themselves under the peer review. It's not that easy, not that easy. I'm happy that I can recognize the Court of Accounts by reading the report, and I'm happy to agree with the recommendations you make. They are very relevant. So, credit goes to the peer review team who has done the work under exceptional circumstances, which were not planned in, but Mother Nature has put you under that challenge. You mastered it. Fantastic. Credit goes to Parliament, who shows very genuine interest in the work of Court of Accounts and is very keen to support through Chair of Committee, through the Speaker. Excellent. And credit goes to Court of Accounts, who has made serious investment, who has put themselves under peer review. It's a voluntary. I can confirm it's voluntary. It's your initiative. So, splendid. All good. Yeah. But, as said, it's fragile. The success is fragile. I think we have to recognize, but it's an opportunity, definitely. And I think in this context, the most important single issue here is to ensure the full independence of the Court of Accounts. Details were here spelled out. This is very important. But on the other hand, this independence shouldn't be without accountability. Court of Accounts is accountable for your doings. This is the act of accountability. You give opportunity for the Parliament. You inform where are you and what is needed. And here it's clear also the support from the Parliament is needed in ensuring the full independence of the Court of Accounts. So those are the few things I would like to see. And you know, I studied history. Life is very strange. Who would have believed that you are now candidate country? Yeah. So there is a history offers windows of opportunity. This is your window of opportunity. Just go on. Use this momentum. The next window of opportunity might be who knows when. Good luck.
Thank you, Peter. Before we open for general questions or anything like that, I'd like to give Mr. Lupu, the President of the Court, an opportunity to present what he sees, his response to the Court, the peer review report, and where he sees the vision for the Court in moving forward in this regard. Mr. Lupu?
Mulțumesc foarte mult. Întâi de toate vreau să mulțumesc colegii de la Sigma care au desfășurat această acțiune, această activitate, o activitate de evaluare internațională a Curții de Conturi care se întâmplă pentru prima oară
în istoria de, iată, acum 28 de ani a Instituției Supreme de Audit din Republica Moldova. Atât experții care au muncit nemijlocit la implementarea acestui exercițiu, cât și toți colegii, toți partenerii cu care am muncit și continuăm să muncim, fiindcă toate aceste componente au venit cu un rezultat comun. Ele nu pot fi divizate, despărțite unul de altul. Nu o să iau prea mult din timpul dumneavoastră, dar vreau încă o dată să trecem cap-coadă, pe scurt, dar și foarte concret. De ce? Pentru ce am avut noi nevoie de această evaluare pe review, ce avem de gând să facem și cum vedem mai departe rezultatele acestui raport. Inițiativa a aparținut Curții de Conturi. Din start vreau să vă spun că nu s-a dat destul de ușor. Noi am purtat cu colegii, membrii Curții de Conturi, plus minus 2 luni de zile discuții pe intern și în speță martie-aprilie 2019, înainte de a adopta o asemenea decizie. Dar ea a fost unica corectă. Scopul solicitării pe care noi de fapt l-am lansat în primăvara anului 2019 și către toamna anului 2019 s-a materializat într-un acord, o echipă, resurse alocate și mă bucur foarte mult că această echipă de evaluare a fost condusă de către Sigma. Inițiativa comună a Comisiei Europene și OCDE-ul. O organizație probabil cea mai redutabilă pe plan european și pe plan internațional, pe diferite domenii, dar întâi de toate, pe mine ca și președintele Curții de Conturi, mă interesează domeniul de audit public extern. Întrebarea logică, pentru ce am avut noi nevoie de această evaluare? S-a vorbit și sunt foarte recunoscător și domnului Cala, președintele Organizației Europene a Instituțiilor Supreme de Audit, concomitent atrag atenția că domnia sa reprezintă și ISA din țara care deține la moment președinția Consiliului Uniunii Europene prin rotație. Scopul a fost să verificăm, să avem o viziune independentă, o viziune obiectivă și profesionistă, nu pe motivul că bordul Curții de Conturi, plenul Curții de Conturi nu avea propriile viziuni privind prioritățile strategice de dezvoltare continuă a Curții de Conturi. Dar motivul a fost, având propria noastră viziune, să nu ne temem, să fim deschiși, transparenți și să obținem o valoare adăugată și mai mare printr-o viziune de experți venită de la specialiști redutabili. Astfel încât să ne asigurăm că mișcarea noastră în procesul de dezvoltare strategică și tactică a tuturor activităților desfășurate de Curtea de Conturi sunt orientate în direcție corectă. Această direcție este determinată de cel mai important, activitățile, rapoartele Curții de Conturi, ca să fie considerate, să fie calitative, profesioniste, ele trebuie întâi de toate să corespundă standardelor internaționale în acest domeniu. Și prin toate acțiunile noastre, înțelegerea acestor standarde, desfășurarea lor prin ghiduri, prin manuale, aplicarea acestora prin acțiunile zi de zi a auditorilor Curții de Conturi, acestea sunt ingredientele care aduc la asigurarea calității, credibilității, ori acest ingredient este un ingredient de bază pentru activitatea oricărei Curte de Conturi. Și mai este încă un lucru. Să nu uităm că în anul 2014, Republica Moldova, Parlamentul a ratificat acordul de asociere. Pentru prima dată, dincolo de angajamentele proprii ale Curții de Conturi din 94 de a aplica standardele INTOSAI în activitatea noastră, pentru prima dată, după ratificarea acordului de asociere, prin articolul 49, acest angajament a devenit nu doar angajamentul Curții de Conturi, ca și membru INTOSAI și Eurosai, dar un angajament al tuturor instituțiilor statului Republica Moldova. Respectiv, acest angajament trebuia să fie asigurat prin ritmuri și mai sporite și o calitate și mai înaltă. Astea au fost motivele de bază pentru care decizia Curții de Conturi a fost să solicităm pentru prima dată, repet încă o dată, în practica Republicii Moldova, o asemenea evaluare. Nu sunt sigur dacă Sigma a mai făcut evaluări în alte domenii și în alte instituții în țara noastră. Dacă nu, atunci eu tare sper că practica noastră să fie de bun augur pentru viitor.
The external audit. And on that point, I will just mention that as a candidate country, if you look at our website in Sigma, you can see the monitoring reports we do on a regular basis of the candidate countries in the Western Balkans. We do these every 3 years where we assess their public administration reform development in terms of not just in legal frameworks, but in terms of practice. So we do that roughly every 3 years. And in due course, we can maybe expect, as now you have candidate country, you will come into that. But that's not for me to say at this moment. That'll be driven by the European Commission and how they see that practice. But I would expect that to be the case in some case. But that I would just hasten to add, it's a lighter touch assessment. It doesn't go into a huge amount of depth, and I would keep peer reviews and whatever else, or some external assessment, a more in-depth external assessment, which I think is a good practice for any Supreme Court institution on your agenda going forward every sort of 5 years potentially. And I think, because it's always good to get that external perspective. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Alistair, thank you very much for your remark. Acum, ca să continu, raportul a fost elaborat, da, a durat puțin mai mult din cauza, fiindcă și domnul Oriane menționa, din cauza pandemiei. Important este că am avut o colaborare foarte bună, în sensul în care viziunile noastre strategice și deschiderea au coincis exact ca și scopuri, ca și abordări cu misiunea de evaluare. Avem raportul, un raport foarte important. De aici vreau să punctez al doilea moment și a doua întrebare. Ce va face în continuare Curtea de Conturi cu rezultatele, concluziile și recomandările înaintate de către evaluatori? Acest raport nu se va încheia cu o acțiune nice și va rămâne doar pe hârtie. Deci, rezultatele acestui raport vor fi traduse de o manieră foarte serioasă de către Curtea de Conturi cu sprijinul Comisiei Control Finanțe Publice în practică. Ceea ce ar însemna toate acțiunile care au fost și proiectate pe ecran, ele pot fi în mare parte divizate în două grupuri. Primul grup, acțiuni pe care Curtea în mod operațional trebuie să le desfășoare pe intern. Lucrul ăsta nu cere modificări de regulamente, de legi, asta ține de activitatea noastră și acest raport o să fie carte de căpătâi pentru toți membrii Curții de Conturi și pentru toți șefii de diviziuni în interiorul Curții de Conturi. Noi am solicitat, există aceste recomandări, idei foarte bune, mai departe ține de interesul, repet, nu doar de obligațiunea noastră, dar de interesul nostru, ele să fie transpuse în practică, astfel încât să dezvoltăm în continuare direcția pozitivă de mișcare de până în prezent. Și al doilea grup de acțiuni, acțiuni care vor cere modificarea cadrului normativ și cel legislativ. Păi iată aici, angajamentul nostru este unul foarte clar. În următoarele luni până la sfârșitul anului, urmarea examinării tuturor recomandărilor pe review, vom elabora proiectele de amendamente cu notă informativă, cu argumentare și având în vedere că noi nu dispunem de dreptul de inițiativă legislativă, o să prezentăm tot setul de propuneri către Comisia de Profil, către Comisia doamnei Cunețchi, pentru ca, mai departe deja, ele să fie transformate în inițiative legislative oficiale, puse în circuit și adoptate. Aici, acest proces primește o valență mult mai importantă, fiindcă mi-a atras atenția ceea ce a menționat de câteva ori domnul Oriane Viera. Ăsta nu este un subiect tehnic. Nu este un subiect care ține doar de o instituție care se numește Curtea de Conturi din Republica Moldova. Procesul de dezvoltare a sistemului de audit public este important prin a fi o componentă a ceea ce noi numim sistemul de management a finanțelor publice. Și domnul Oriane a menționat că un punct cheie va fi elaborarea strategiei de management a finanțelor publice, iar auditul public extern și rolul curții este unul în cadrul acestui proces. Mi-a tras atenția faptul că domnia s-a menționat că acest criteriu, dezvoltarea unei asemenea strategii, întărirea sistemului de management a finanțelor publice în țara noastră, este un criteriu eminamente politic, un criteriu de importanță strategică pentru avansarea pe calea agendei europene a țării noastre. Deci, miza este mult prea importantă. Aici se cer nu declarații frumoase, aici se cer acțiuni, pentru ca sistemul de management a finanțelor publice să fie unul cât mai eficient, cât mai corect și cât mai rezultativ în termen de producerea efectelor, urmarea utilizării pentru politicile economice și sociale a țării a banului public. Nu uităm că banul public aici, în mare parte, depinde și de contribuțiile a fondurilor europene pentru dezvoltarea Republicii Moldova. Eu mă opresc aici, fiindcă pentru Curtea de Conturi obiectivele sunt foarte clare, scopurile sunt foarte clare, ele sunt practice, strategic importante. Iată de ce angajamentul nostru este de implementare, inclusiv prin ajustările necesare la strategia noastră 2021-2025. În mare parte această strategie deja a fost ajustată pe parcursul muncii asupra acestui raport, dar ne mai rămân încă anumite elemente. Abordare serioasă, echipa este absolut capabilă și conștientă pentru o asemenea activitate. Comisia de profil a Parlamentului, noi avem o colaborare foarte bună și lucrul ăsta a ridicat puternic eficiența în domeniul finanțele publice. Dacă până la crearea Comisiei nu mai mult de 28% din rapoartele Curții erau examinate în Parlament, odată cu crearea Comisiei, noi avem până la nivel de 90% aceste rapoarte care sunt trecute prin examinare aici. Și sarcina la fel este foarte importantă a Comisiei de a întări mai departe controlul parlamentar asupra implementării recomandărilor care derivă din aceste rapoarte. Ele sunt multe și sunt foarte importante. Oversize-ul, monitoring-ul structurilor executive. Deci, voi încheia cu ce am început. Toate mulțumirile noastre pentru autorii raportului de evaluare. Un raport pe care noi îl luăm foarte și foarte la serios și înțelegem foarte bine că de realizarea acestor recomandări, concluzii, depinde foarte mult îmbunătățirea în continuare a calității exercițiului de audit public extern și nu doar, și în egală măsură acest lucru va contribui la calitatea și viteza negocierilor, cel puțin la capitolul 32, care derivă din chestionarul pe care Republica Moldova l-a primit înainte de obținerea statutului de țară candidat și respectiv este acest capitol 32 și de negocieri ulterioare. Deci noi acoperim mai multe priorități, iată de ce lucrul o să ne aștepte serios. Comisia o să ne ierte dacă noi o să fim prea activi, agresivi cu propuneri, dar Comisia este suficient de activă, chiar foarte activă în acest sens, dar cred că o să aibă de chinuit și alte comisii de profil a Parlamentului care vor fi implicate în această muncă, în special de perfecționare a cadrului legal pentru asigurarea independenței curții și pentru eficiența actului de exercițiu de management a finanțelor publice. Mulțumesc colegilor la Comisia Europeană, delegația Comisiei Europene la Chișinău. Contăm și mai departe pe această colaborare foarte utilă și foarte importantă pentru noi.
Da, mulțumim mult pentru intervenție, mulțumim mult pentru prezentare. Acum, dacă cineva mai dorește să ia cuvântul, îi oferim astfel de posibilitate. Dacă nu, Noi lucrăm deja o oră aproape și jumate, deci cred că este suficient ca mesajele principale să fie înțelease. Eu, ca președinte a Comisiei de Control al Finanțelor Publice, nu pot ca să nu-mi exprim gratitudine față de echipa care a făcut acest exercițiu de evaluare a activității Curții de Conturi pe review. Deci mulțumiri celor implicați, OECD și Sigma, mulțumim celor care au sprijinit această activitate, fiindcă eu consider că raportul pe review-ului va sta la baza asigurării continuității dezvoltării strategice a Curții de Conturi, ceea ce și s-a făcut în ultima perioadă de timp, iar noi, ca comisie, întotdeauna suntem receptivi la toate propunerile de îmbunătățire a activității de audit, care vine să îmbunătățească administrarea resurselor financiare publice și a patrimoniului public. Până la urmă, dacă această activitate va fi sau va aduce beneficiu cetățenilor Republicii noastre, noi vom avea motiv ca să ne mândrim de activitatea care o facem. Deci mulțumim tuturor pentru prezență, pentru înțelegere, pentru receptivitate. Ne dorim să fim sănătoși ca să realizăm cele care ne le-am propus, să ne înțeleagă și alți colegi ca să ne mișcăm mai departe și să avem noi performanțe. Mulțumim tuturor!